Well, good morning. How are you all today? Welcome to Integrative Preparedness. I'm Steve Smith. Do you want to be able to shoot more effectively? That's what I'm going to talk about. I'll talk about it, and if you do what I suggest, you're going to be shooting more effectively in certain situations, in the important situations. Okay. Now, let me say who this is not for. This is not for advanced shooters. Well, it could be for advanced shooters, depending on what they are advanced in. This is not for top tier special ops guys. This is not for competition shooters, uh, although it is for them if they have not trained in self-defense shooting, things like that. It's going to be mainly for the beginner to intermediate person who carries a gun mainly as self-defense. Okay, and not for people who just want to compete. Not three gun. Not I don't even know what all the shooting um, organizations are. It's never interested me. I've never been interested in shooting for sport. If you're not familiar with me, I was a police officer and deputy sheriff for years. Carried a gun for 50 years now, and so and I do it for one purpose and one purpose only, and that is in case I need it to defend myself or someone else. So if that's what's interesting to you, this will be interesting to you, and it will improve your shooting. Now, whether you're brand new, matter of fact, I had I took a couple of young men through my introductory handgun course just yesterday. It was a friend of mine. He has two sons. One is I think a senior in college, and the other had just started his first year at the Air Force Academy. And what kind of brought it up? He says, "Well, his younger son in the academy, he's going to have to qualify. Would you mind coming over and giving him some pointers and things like that?" And I said, "Yeah, you bet." A lot of the stuff that I taught them was more about self-defense shooting than what they're going to need at the academy, which is, well, I don't know what the Air Force Academy does, but when I was in the police academy, it was shooting at a lot of paper targets. Everything from 2 yards to 50 yards, and why you would be shooting a handgun at 50 yards, I don't know, but but that's what they had us do anyway. And so I took them through this, and I took them through pretty much what I take even experienced shooters through when I teach them uh, more effective ways to deal with self-defense shooting situations. And I love teaching. I really do. I don't teach anymore because I don't like to teach. Now, what does that mean? well, Steve, you have some kind of split personality? No, I love teaching people who want to learn. Okay, but most people don't really want to learn. They just want to talk about it. They want to hear about it and talk about it. And the person who really wants to learn, that's a rare individual. The person who will listen. And when it comes to gun, I find that a lot of times women are better at this than guys, because guys have this idea that, well, I'm a guy, I know all about this stuff. And when I'm teaching guys, I'll see them kind of tone out and just kind of try to wait me out, all this seemingly boring stuff that I'm covering, which they don't realize is very important. And to where we get down to the shooting part, right? To where as women, they pay attention. They listen to everything I say. And that's the difference between actually, well, wanting to learn and thinking you already know. Okay. So the first thing you have to do is fight that tendency to think that you know it all. So when I talk about shooting more effectively, what do I mean by that? Well, what is the effect that you're after? Okay. If the effect that you're after is just putting holes in paper targets, then that's not what we're talking about here. Although it can come into that too, but we're not talking about bullseye shooting. We're not talking about going to the range, a nice, well lit flat range to where you can take your time and line your sights up and pull that, or they say press nowadays. Pull the trigger smoothly and see how close you got to the bullseye. Yeah, and then see if you can get that next shot right through that one on the bullseye, and then get the next one right through the hole that was in the bullseye. No, that's not what this is about. I don't really care about being effective in punching holes in paper. What I care about is being effective in the rare instance where I might be called upon to use a gun in self-defense or in the defense of another. And that's one thing. I'm not going to get into detail here. This is where, if you go to a concealed carry class or something like that, one of the reasons to go to one of those classes is because they will introduce you to the legal aspects of the use of a gun in your state. But it boils down to essentially you're able to use lethal force or potentially lethal force. And if you feel that you or another is in danger of death or serious bodily harm. Okay. But I'm going to stop it right there. There's a lot more to deal with on that, and that's not what we're here. If you are ever in a situation where you have to use your gun to defend yourself or someone else, it's going to be very different than most training prepares you for. Okay. Excuse me just a second. Chances are you're not going to be in a well-lit area. You might be, but you're not going to be in a well-lit area with targets hanging and other fairly polite people around you. It's going to happen suddenly. It's going to happen close up, which means it's not going to be happening at 25 yards. Okay, and that's just and let me put out a warning here for those of you who are here to learn. Every time I put up a video about guns, it attracts a lot of idiots. There's a lot more people out there who like to talk about guns than actually know about guns. A lot more people who like to talk about gunfighting than actually know about gunfighting. And they are drawn to these kinds of videos like flies to a light, okay, moth to a flame, whatever. And they will come on and start expressing all sorts of opinions, most of which have absolutely no basis in fact or experience, okay, because they're passing on what they have heard someone else say, and the person who said it is passing it on for something that they heard. That's the difference between people who talk about what they've heard or read in a gun magazine or heard from a guy at a gun counter and people who actually have the experience. So I would suggest don't come on here and say stupid stuff. I will remove the comment because I don't allow that in here because I don't want it to mislead the people who are here to learn. One of my biggest videos, and I see that YouTube is promoting it a lot lately, I don't know why, is why you should not carry a 9mm. And oh man, that just stirred the people up like you can't believe, because so many people out there have heard you need a 9mm. Well, it's certainly not what I suggest, and I give my reasons in detail on that. There were so many idiots on there, I had to shut the comments off simply because I won't allow stupidity to murk up the waters and potentially mislead people who are actually trying to learn. Does that make sense? Okay. So if it comes upon you, unfortunately, that you have to use your gun in a self-defense situation, it's not going to be in ideal circumstances. Okay, it's going to happen quickly. It's going to you're going to be confused. If you've watched my previous videos about in an attack situation, you have three enemies. You have confusion, fear, and then the attacker or whatever. You're going to be going through that. And then if you watch another one, an old one of mine, about how attacks usually they may happen suddenly, but rarely without warning. And people who think it was without warning simply missed the clues. And so, being aware of the world around you is your number one defense. First off, don't go places that that these potential situations might arise more frequently. So stay out of those places. But this still might happen. But I want to say this also, for the people who are always wanting to trim an extra half a second off their fast draw, you're never going to have to fast draw. Simple as that. People who want to argue about which gun is best or whatever it is, a double tap here probably never going to happen. Since I left law enforcement 35 years ago, how many times I've had to pull my gun out of its holster? Never. So So you're probably never going to have to. Okay. So I'm putting all these things up to give you a realistic idea of what you need to know when it comes to using your gun to defend yourself or another. Okay, I was going to say something else. I'll slip that in later. When it happens, if you ever need to use your weapon, there are all sorts of things that many gun trainers will hammer that are simply not going to come into, they're not going to be important in that situation. You will hear things about acquiring your sights. Let me tell you this. If you get into a situation where all of a sudden somebody is pointing a gun at you or shoot, whatever, you know the last thing you're going to be looking at or trying to see is your sights. You are going to be experiencing a pucker factor that you haven't experienced before once you get through the confusion. And the last thing you're going to do is try to find your sights. Now, this does not apply, like I say, this does not apply to government-trained shooters. And what I mean by that, the top echelon of government-trained shooters, meaning SWAT and special forces and the special operations people, they have shot thousands, in some cases probably millions of rounds. They can put their shots where they want, pretty close, not always exactly, but pretty close. That is not where they want them. That's not the average shooter. That's not the average person. The average person, first off, you couldn't afford to buy that much ammo to get that good. And secondly, most people don't want to. You want a tool to be able to protect yourself with, and that's just about it. So for everybody else, and now at that level, they'll be talking about things like, acquiring your sights, trigger reset, a whole lot of different things, breath control, okay, a lot of things that are simply not going to apply to the person wanting to get good enough to protect themselves. Okay? And even if you do, I'll tell you what, you can go through all of that stuff. You can go through acquiring your sights. You can go through trigger reset. And if you don't know what that means, that's just, watch another video from somebody else. Breath control. You can get great on that at the range, okay? Because you're going to have an instructor there telling you, and in your ear, reminding you what you didn't do, and after a while you'll get pretty good at it. The night that you walk into a convenience store and you're at the counter and one or two guys comes in with guns drawn, they're robbing the place. Guess how well you're going to do all that. Guess how well you're going to, or even think about acquiring your sights. Because acquiring your sights takes a little more time. This is not the time, I'll say this right here, not the time to try to draw. Don't never draw against a gun pointing at you. It's just not going to work. Okay. But you're not going to be thinking about the trigger reset, and you're not going to be thinking about breath control. You're going to be thinking about you're in a situation to where you could die very quickly. You could die within the next few seconds if you're not able to pull this off, right? How do you pull it off? If you're able to, if you're in a situation to where you're able to pull your weapon and get it on target, by that I mean simply pointing it at the threat, you want to be able to put several rounds in what we call center mass. You're not going for headshots. You don't shoot to wound. You don't shoot to kill. You shoot to stop the threat. Simple as that. And you shoot until the threat is eliminated. Doesn't mean you shoot. Doesn't mean you run your 17-round gun dry. Okay, that's that's indicative of either fear or bloodlust. Okay, you want to put a few into center mass of the person who is the threat, however many it takes until they're no longer a threat to you. And you're going to do that by being able to get your weapon on target quickly and putting a few in. Now they say, and there are figures about this, that the average gunfight happens within, what do they say, 3 yards or 3 feet, one of those. Doesn't matter. These things don't matter, whether it's 3 feet or 3 yards. They can be very close. 3 yards, I say. And it happens within 3 seconds, and it happens within, it uses about 3 rounds. Okay. There's question as to whether how valid that information is, but it's closer than not close. Most gun exchanges, gun encounters don't go on. They don't last a long time. They're not out at 50 yards, and they don't take that many rounds, except for the people, like I say, that are either fearful or full of bloodlust. Fearful, well, hope you can, make the jury believe that. Bloodlust, that's going to get you time in the joint. Excuse me while I take a sip. Yeah. I'll talk about shot placement as everything in just a minute. In a self-defense shooting situation, it's very dynamic. Things are moving. Your heart's pumping fast. You're shocked. Your adrenaline is racing. Okay. Your hand is not the steady hand that it usually is. It's not like rock solid. It's like, let me. Okay. You don't know what's around you. The light's not always great unless you're in a convenience store. The footing may not be right. The distance may be, complicated if it's a little bit farther. And the farther away you are, the more difficult it is to put that pill exactly where you want it, especially when you're going through all of these mental and emotional things that cause physical ramifications. Okay, your breathing tends to get fast and shallow. Your heart rate's up. Like I say, a lot of these things are happening. You're going through stress. And the average person who is not used to this, that is going to detract from their ability to work as smoothly as they want to, right? Okay, so that's why we go for center mass. And center mass is just, right up here in the chest area. Okay. Are you going to acquire your sights? This is the first thing that I start teaching people. I don't teach people to acquire their sights. I teach people point shooting, or what's called intuitive shooting. Now, what that means is you don't use your sights. Now, for those people who have been taught ever since they started, got to use your sights, got to use your sights. The SEAL Team 6 uses their sights, and they use 9 millimeters, or Delta. Well, you're not SEAL Team 6, and you're not Delta, and you haven't trained with 1 million rounds of government ammo, and you want to shoot the threat in the area that you have the biggest chance of striking them with the biggest bullet. This is why I don't suggest 9 millimeter. The bigger the round, the more damage it does, the more blood loss, and that's what really ends things. Okay, simple as that. No arguments from anybody wanting to talk about how much you love your 9 millimeter. I'll take you off because you'll mislead people, and you're wrong. Okay. Point shooting or intuitive shooting is simply shooting without sights. Now, the first thing that I had these young men do yesterday to prove my point, and I'll say this too, I have worked with guys who have shot for years and shot with their sights. And as soon as I gave them this little exercise that I'm going to give you, it improved their shooting. They were able to shoot pretty much as well without sights as they were with sights. Okay, and it takes a lot less time than trying to acquire your sight. Take your finger, point it at something. Don't look at where you're pointing. Just point it at something over there on the wall. Where you are, not where I am. Right? Point it at something. Now look down and don't move your hand. Put your head down so you can see exactly where the trajectory of that finger is going. And you will find out if it's not exactly on it, it's real close, close enough. Okay? You know why? Simply because you've lived with your finger all your life. It's a part of you. It's an extension of your mind. Your mind sends the signal. Point at that. You point at it, you're going to be dead on. Here's where becoming familiar with your weapon is important. You want to train to the point, train point shooting, intuitive shooting, to the point where your pistol becomes an extension of your hand, of your finger, of yourself. Okay. Now, I'm not going to go into grips and everything like this. Another thing that I told these guys yesterday was that get a grip that's comfortable for you. There's a certain grip that happens to be the thing nowadays. Is not the grip I use. I'm not going to go into that. You watch some videos. There's a million videos on people who want to tell you how to show you how to hold a gun. The stance that I use is not the stance that is the stance du jour now. You'll find that every so often a new stance is discovered or developed by somebody. When I went through the police academy back in the 70s, there was a stance that we used. And then later on, there was the Weaver stance came about, and then the isosceles, and then the modified isosceles, and all these kinds of things. In the gun world, the gun world is full of people who are consumed with everything gun, right? And somebody will come up with a new idea, and sometimes they're good and sometimes they're not. And they'll come up with something, and maybe somebody does very well in competition shooting using that. And so other people pick it up and they start to promote it. And then it becomes a truism simply because it's been repeated by so many people. Is it the best that there's ever been? I don't know. Is it the best that will ever be? Well, I'll guarantee you, in a few years, somebody's going to come up with something new and they're going to say that that's the best. That's the only way you can do it. And every time something new comes up, if you do it an old way or a different way, you're going to have these gun ninjas jumping all over you, saying that you don't know what you're doing and you got to do it like, 99.99999. Never been in a gunfight, right? But they're going to tell you all the things you're doing wrong. Don't worry about that. Look at the different grips that people will tell you all about. Find something that you can hold. The important thing is you hold that gun steady. You hold it steady. Okay. The reason for that is you want it to be steady when you squeeze the trigger. You want to be able to hit what you're shooting at, and then you don't want to have what they call it recoil control or muzzle flip control. Okay, you want to be able to still hit your target with follow-up shots. And if you're bouncing all over the place, it's going to be hard to get it back down. You want to hold it steady in a stance that's right, in a grip that's right for you. You figure out what's right for you. Okay. There's plenty of people out there on YouTube wanting to tell you how to do it. So after you understand and you trust that you can point where you want to, now start doing it with your gun. Take the magazine out, rack it, or if you're a revolver, make sure it's empty. I'll just put it that. Make sure it's empty. And I was working with these young men yesterday, and I says, okay, now, without looking at the sights, I showed them how to hold it. I want you to put that muzzle right on, and I gave them little targets around the room, within what's a normal self-defense shooting area, which is pretty much within the size of a room. Okay, it's not 25 yards. It's going to be, 10, 20 feet. I said, put it right on there. Now hold it there. Don't look at the sights. Don't look at anything. Just bring it up. Put it up where you think is there. Now, without moving your hands at all, and you can do it, lower your head until where you can see the sights line up. And see where they sight? That means where the post is equidistant between the rear sight and level. And they looked, and both of them were shocked. They says, man. One guy says, well, I'm about 2 inches off. Oh, 2 inches is fine. The other guy says, I'm about right on it. Okay, there you go. Now, what I want you to do is do that. Spend an entire evening. Watch TV. Watch some show to where people are popping up. I'll leave it to you to decide who you want to do this on. Every time first off, start with stationary things, around your room. Bam. Now, check yourself. You know those fancy things that are out now that say, get better without going to the range and laser or whatever? I don't even know what those are because it's not necessary. Not necessary to spend money when you can do this and it's effective. Do that for a while and then do it with TV. And I did this when I was in the police academy. I just sit there and watch me on TV, and every time a new head would pop up, I'd bring my weapon up and I'd find, yep, right on it. Right on it. The more you do it, the better you get. And then go to the range. Excuse me, I need another shot. Another sip of shot placement is everything if you're using a small caliber. If you're using a larger caliber, which you should be, then tissue damage is everything. Okay. And then go to the range. And start at about, run your target out about, it doesn't have to be far, 10 feet. And just from a low ready, which I'm not going to demonstrate here. Again, there's a million guys on YouTube going to show you what a low ready is. Just bring your pistol up and pop it. Don't aim. Just bring it up. Bang. See how you do. Take a look at that. Okay. I'm a little bit low. Okay. Do it again. Bang. Okay. Still a little bit low. And to the left. Okay. Bang. Ooh, that was better. Okay. A little bit high because I overcompensated. Bang. Ooh, there we go. Do that. Do that. And then run it out, 15 feet, run it out 20 feet. This is not for bullseye shooting. But if you're interested in self-defense is not bullseye shooting. And then run a couple of boxes through. By that, I mean run a couple of boxes of ammo through it. Just keep doing it until you get comfortable. And then do it with your strong hand. Because what if you get shot in or something happens to your other hand? You're not able to support your grip. You need to be able to do it one-handed. Okay? Then do it with your weak hand, because what if the wing that got taken out is your strong wing? You need to do it with now is when you really start learning. You always learn more from what you do wrong or what you are not successful at than what you are successful at. And when you're successful at something, you've learned one way that it's successful. When you're unsuccessful, you learn all sorts of reasons, right? Okay. So do it with your weak hand, because you might need to do it with your weak hand. And then it gets frustrating, but overcome your frustration. But still, always go back to the two-handed, because that's the ideal. Okay. And then just do that. And then another thing that I will tell you to be aware of, you will hear that marksmanship is a perishable skill. Well, marksmanship may be. I don't know. I don't consider myself a marksman. Okay. Meaning I don't shoot long distance. Never been my interest. I care about somebody threatening me right here. It might be a perishable skill in that case. It's not that perishable when you're talking about a self-defense situation, once you have gotten intuitive shooting, point shooting down. Okay. I go, and you know who tells you that? Who tells you that it's a perishable skill? Guys who teach gun classes, because they want you to come back. They want you to spend a couple $1,000s to come to their gunfighting 101 school, and then, but remember, it's perishable. You come back next year, or come back for the next one in 6 months, or come back for the level 2 class, or the level 3 class. And I know people. There's so many people out there. You can watch them on YouTube who have spent thousands of dollars going to very advanced classes on gunfighting, gun handling, all sorts of things. And they will never need it. The normal person just doesn't need it. You need to be able to assess a threat, draw your weapon, acquire your target, not through your sights, and put whatever you need to in there to stop the threat, and that's it. Now, I should probably do another one about what to do. Maybe I will. Although maybe I will do this one on the Patreon channel. So if you're not with us on Patreon, the link's down below. Oh, by the way, I just put up on the Patreon channel this morning the cover of my new book, my 8th book. And I won't tell you what the title is. I almost slipped and said it. I'm not going to do it. Hopefully it'll be out this summer, but I put that on the Stonemont level of the Patreon page. So what to do after you, if you were ever unfortunately in a shooting situation, what you should do after, because I totally disagree with much of the advice out there. And that comes from being a police officer and dealing with prosecutors and dealing with juries and things like that. I'll do that on a separate one. But that's essentially what you need to be able to do. Simple. Very simple. Do you know there are probably more people who successfully defend themselves against attacks with handguns without a bunch of training than those with a bunch of training. Because everybody, has the same chance. Well, depending on what kind of places you hang at, everybody has the same, chance, percentage-wise, of being a victim. Or wherever. People don't just attack people who don't have any training. They don't just attack people who have a lot of training. It's pretty much spread out. And those who don't have much training or any training very often are able to successfully defend themselves because it's not that complicated. Doesn't matter how complicated people want to make it. Know the rules of gun safety. Be safe with your gun. I don't even allow, when I start a new class, we go through that. My kids could spell it out by the time they were 8, in case you don't know them. And here's again, you'll find all sorts of videos about this. I don't have to make a whole video about it. Number 1, all guns are always loaded. Even if they're not, treat them as if they are. Number 2, never allow your muzzle to cover anything you're not willing to destroy. The muzzle is the little hole where the bullet comes out. Okay. Number 3, keep your finger off the trigger until you have acquired your target, meaning that your muzzle is on target. And number 4, be aware of your target and what's beyond. You are responsible for every pill that comes out of that gun. And there's a saying, and it's true, just realize there is a lawyer attached to every bullet you expend. You have to be right. You are responsible for everything that gun does. And if you are trying to intercede in a robbery in a convenience store, and you take out the robber, but one of your rounds goes awry and it hits that little girl over in the corner, you're responsible for that. So be aware. There's no such thing as an accidental discharge. It's a negligent discharge, because if your gun goes off and you didn't mean it to, because you were negligent. Okay? All right. Well, I hope that that's helped for the people who, because I know it can be kind of overwhelming getting into the gun world. Oh my gosh, there's so much and so many people talking about so many things, and it seems so complicated. It's not. It's not. You do what I've suggested, and you'll be every bit as good as you need to be to defend yourself and those with you. Okay? All right. You all have a great day. I will say this. I don't answer questions on these things on YouTube. If you want to ask a question, because I also post this on Patreon. And if you're not with us on Patreon, come over. Join. It's $1 a month, except for the Stonemont level. That's $5. If you want, because I talk about personal stuff over there. Matter of fact, I'm going to put up a personal story that was really funny about a time that I was a brand new cop in the hood, and well, I'll just leave it at that. It's a funny gun story. It's funny because it worked out. The difference between a story being funny and sad is how it ends, right? It's very often. So if you're not with us, the link to the Patreon channel is down below. And just do what I say and you'll be right. Okay? All right. You all have a good day. Remember that we prepare well today in order to live well tomorrow. And I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.